The clinking of silverware suddenly froze in the air, as if sound itself had been suspended. My daughter-in-law, Jessica, had just spoken words that echoed across the dining room. "Starting next month, Margaret, the guest room will cost $2,300 in rent." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. Surrounded by the smell of roasted turkey and buttery potatoes, I felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. How could someone who once called me Mom now treat me like a stranger? I looked around the table. 15 people, all with lowered eyes, forks hovering in the air, pretending to chew a silence heavier than any word. David, my son, kept his gaze fixed on the mashed potatoes, unable to lift his eyes to mine. My chest tightened. This was the very house where Robert and I had raised our children, the home we had fought so hard to build. And now, I was being treated as an unwelcome guest. My heart pounded, threatening to betray me at any second. Jessica, with that sweet but poisonous smile, folded her napkin as though she were closing a business deal. "I'm even being generous. It's below market value," she added. Generous? Charging rent from her own widowed mother-in-law was generosity? Was I dreaming? The knife beside my plate gleamed under the dining room light, and I wanted to bury in it all the pain I was feeling. But I stayed silent, breathing deeply. What was I supposed to answer in the face of such an insult? Before my mind could be consumed by the humiliation of that dinner, my thoughts drifted back to when I was simply Margaret, wife of Robert Thompson. I could still smell the fresh paint of our home in Maple Grove, that summer of 1990, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a backyard where the children would play until dusk. It was there we built our refuge, brick by brick, not only with money, but with sacrifice and shared dreams. Robert always used to say, "Maggie, this house is more than walls. It's our fortress. Here nothing can tear us down." And I believed him. I left my nursing career when David was born. Then came Catherine and Amanda, and my life became entirely devoted to them. How many sleepless nights did I spend nursing fevers? How many times did I soothe broken hearts? How many tears did I wipe away in silence? Could all of that now be forgotten, reduced to a rent bill? I remembered the small celebration in 2015 when we finally paid off the mortgage. Robert grilled steaks. I made his favorite potato salad. We danced in the kitchen to our wedding song, our laughter filling the air. If I close my eyes, I can still feel his strong hands holding mine. How would the man who gave me so much love have reacted, seeing his widow being called dead weight in her own home? That question burned inside me, and I feared I'd have to face the answer alone. When Robert passed away, loneliness fell over me like an icy blanket. The house, once filled with voices and footsteps, seemed to echo only sadness. That's when Jessica, David's wife, appeared with sweet words. "Come live with us, Mom. The kids will love having Grandma around." Fragile and grieving, I clung to that invitation as if it were a lifeline. Her voice sounded warm, her smile sincere. How could I have imagined that behind that facade lay something darker? At first, everything seemed perfect. I helped prepare Sunday dinners, took Sophia and Tyler to school, even shared morning coffee chats with Jessica, who asked about my life with Robert. She once said, "I admire your strength, Margaret." And I believed her. But small details began to unsettle me. Her sigh when she saw my clothes drying on the line, the frown when the kids ran to hug me first. Were these just things in my head, or early signs of a rejection growing in silence? Over time, her affectionate words turned into veiled remarks. "The electric bill has gone up. Must be because of your long showers." Or, "There's more laundry than usual, isn't there?" I smiled to keep from crying, convincing myself it was just stress. But inside, I sensed it. The once welcoming daughter-in-law was becoming a toxic daughter-in-law, and I didn't know how far she was willing to go. Was I blind, or just refusing to see? Thanksgiving dinner carried the scent of cinnamon and roasted turkey, but the taste of the evening was bitter. While everyone tried to smile behind the clinking of glasses, Jessica cleared her throat and announced boldly, "Margaret, starting next month, you'll be paying $2,300 for the guest room." My sister-in-law's fork slipped from her hand, hitting the porcelain plate with a sharp sound. The silence that followed was louder than any family argument. My heart raced, and my eyes sought out David. He sat motionless, digging into his mashed potatoes as though they held the answer to his cowardice. Not a word left his lips. And I wondered, how could a son, to whom I had given everything, stay silent while his mother was publicly humiliated? Jessica, on the other hand, seemed to savor every second, casually adjusting her hair like she had rehearsed the moment. "I'm even being kind, below market rate," she added, her voice dripping with false generosity. I looked around and saw uncomfortable faces, relatives pushing food around their plates to avoid meeting my eyes. The air in the room felt thick, impossible to breathe. The pain wasn't just from the absurd demand, but from the silent betrayal of everyone who chose not to speak. Unable to bear it, I pushed my chair back. The screech of wood against the floor echoed like a muted scream. I stood slowly, my legs trembling, and said only, "Excuse me." As I walked away, one thought consumed me. Was this the beginning of my end in that house? In the days following that dinner, I noticed subtle changes, sharp as blades. Jessica spoke on the phone with contractors, discussing paint colors, hardwood floors, even a new kitchen project. Passing by the hallway, I overheard phrases like, "This house needs a modern touch," or "We're going to raise the property's value." Property? This was my home, my history. But in her words, it sounded like it already belonged to her. Did she truly see herself as the owner? Every visit from suppliers felt like a stab. The smell of fresh paint, once tied to the dream of building a family, now made me nauseous. I saw boxes of samples, expensive catalogs spread across the living room, and Jessica bragging to her book club about how she was finally making the house what it should have been all along. Meanwhile, the room where I slept was left intentionally shabby. Peeling walls, worn curtains. It was a daily reminder I was an intruder. At night, lying in bed, I heard Jessica's heels clicking down the hallway, muffled conversations with David about budgets and contracts. My chest ached. Was it just my imagination, or was she plotting something bigger? The way her eyes lit up at every mention of remodeling left me restless. Was she building her glory on the ruins of my pain? At first, I thought it was just coincidence. Sophia and Tyler, my grandchildren, used to run into my room after school, bringing colorful drawings or stories about their friends. But suddenly, Jessica started showing up at the door with that fake smile. "Not now, kids. Grandma needs to rest." I wasn't tired. It was my heart that was weary from being pushed aside. Did my affection bother her that much? The excuses grew more frequent. "They need to focus on homework," or "Grandma can't spoil you all the time." Slowly, the whole way to my room turned into an invisible barrier the children no longer crossed. I heard their laughter muffled behind the living room walls while silence settled over my space. What once felt like home now became a prison. It wasn't open rejection, but a silent suffering carefully calculated to erase me little by little. One evening, I opened my door to call Sophia and found only her backpack on the floor. Jessica's cold voice cut through the quiet. "The kids are already asleep." Her tone sounded more like an order than a statement. I closed the door softly, as though burying another piece of my soul. How long could I endure being torn away from the very ones I loved most? One ordinary afternoon, as I walked through the kitchen, I heard the sharp sound of a laptop lid being slammed shut. Jessica's eyes gave her away, a flicker of nervousness she couldn't quite hide. Later, when she left to pick up the kids, I passed by the table and glimpsed what was still on the screen. A search page reading, "Nursing homes near Maple Grove. Medicare available." My body turned cold. Was she really planning to send me away? My heart pounded like it did the day I first heard of Robert's illness. Me, the woman who had cared for him until his final breath, now discarded like a past due bill? The smell of fresh coffee lingered in the kitchen, but all I could taste was bitterness rising in my mouth. Jessica didn't just want to charge me rent. She wanted me erased, exiled under the excuse of taking care of my well-being. Taking care or disposing of me for good? That night, I lay staring at the ceiling, weighed down by the roof that once had been mine. Robert's words echoed in my memory. "Documentation is protection, Maggie." But protection from whom? From strangers or from the very people I called family? The doubt cut deeper than certainty. How far was Jessica willing to go, not just to take my house, but to strip me of my dignity? I couldn't stay silent any longer. One morning, as I saw Jessica serving coffee in the kitchen with that air of ownership, I gathered my courage and asked, "Jessica, why were you searching for nursing homes for me?" The clink of the cup hitting the saucer was her only answer for a few seconds. She looked up, her rehearsed smile still in place. "I thought it would be better for you. More support, more comfort." Comfort? Or a prison? My blood boiled. After everything I've lived through, after raising children, grandchildren, after giving up my career, you think I deserve to be discarded like old furniture? She arched an eyebrow, almost amused by my fury. "Don't exaggerate, Margaret. I'm thinking about everyone's future." Everyone's? Or just hers? My toxic daughter-in-law was no longer hiding her true face. Right there, in the kitchen I had cared for with love, she treated me as nothing more than a problem to be solved. The silence that followed was sharp, slicing through the room. My heart pounded so loud it seemed the walls themselves could hear it. Jessica held her cup firmly, but her eyes spoke louder than words. I was in the way of her plans. Did she have the courage to face me directly? Or would she keep plotting in the shadows until she got me out of that house? That night, I knocked on David's bedroom door. He opened it slowly, his eyes tired, carrying an invisible weight. "Son, are you really going to let your wife treat me this way? You heard everything, and you said nothing." My voice trembled, though I fought to keep it firm.
He lowered his head, fiddling with his shirt cuffs the same way he used to when he was a boy caught in mischief. "Mom, it's not that simple." Not that simple. Since when did defending one's own mother become complicated? The room smelled faintly of aftershave, but underneath it lingered the cold scent of cowardice. "You know this house is our history, David. Your father made me promise to protect it. And you? You pretend not to see?" He sighed, still avoiding my gaze. "Jessica's stressed, thinking about the kids, the bills. I just don't want conflict." His words stabbed me deeper than any knife. Avoiding conflict meant sacrificing me in silence so that he could have peace? I stepped back slowly, tears burning my eyes. David's figure in the dim light looked small, shrunken under his own weakness. The boy who once defended his sister in the schoolyard now couldn't defend his own mother in her house. I asked myself, if even my son didn't have the courage to protect me, where was I supposed to find the strength to go on?
That night, I sat on the edge of my bed with the metal box at my feet. The sound of the latch opening echoed like a secret being revealed. Inside were the folders Robert had always told me to guard carefully. "Documentation is protection, Maggie," he used to say, as though he could foresee this bitter future. I touched the yellowed papers, smelling the mix of aged paper and wood from the room. Inside lay my story and my silent defense. I leafed through deeds, receipts, tax records. Each document was like a brick laid against the storm now pounding at my door. Did Jessica know everything was still under my name? Was she counting on my silence, on the fragility of an elderly widow, to steal what never belonged to her? With every page, my breathing grew steadier, as if I were finding weapons hidden among the ruins. I placed everything back in the box, but something in me had changed. The humiliation still burned, but alongside it grew a spark of resilience. If my own family saw me as a burden, then I needed to see myself as a strong woman, capable of fighting back. And I wondered, was I truly ready to face not only Jessica, but also the crushing silence of my own son? The next morning, I found a white envelope carefully placed on my dresser. The faint citrus perfume gave away who had left it there. My hands trembled as I opened it, and inside was a formal rental contract with my name printed in cold, harsh letters. Monthly rent, $2,300, due on the first of every month. My stomach turned. How could someone from my own family reduce my life to a business transaction? I walked into the kitchen holding the paper. Jessica, already seated at the table, stirred her coffee as if she had been waiting for this moment. "It's for your own good, Margaret. This way everything is clear, no misunderstandings. Rules are necessary." Rules? After decades of raising children, keeping a home, and sacrificing myself, I now needed permission just to exist in my own house? My eyes filled with tears, but I lifted my chin high. Did she really believe I would sign this? As she smiled with satisfaction, convinced of her victory, a certainty grew inside me. I would not be crushed so easily. I would hide my pain, but never surrender my dignity. I might look fragile, but Robert's fire still burned within me. I closed the envelope and simply said, "I need time to think." What Jessica didn't know was that in that very moment, I had already decided I would not bow down. But how could I fight this trap without losing everything? That afternoon, I knocked on Carol's door, my old friend and neighbor. The smell of freshly baked apple pie filled her kitchen, clashing with the bitterness I carried inside me. I sat at her table, and before I could even speak, she took my hands. "Margaret, you don't look well. What's going on?" The tears I had held back for days finally spilled over. I told her everything, every detail of the silent betrayal I was living through in my own home. Carol listened without interrupting, her eyes glistening with indignation. "This is abuse, Margaret. You can't accept this. You need to protect yourself." She reminded me of something I had almost forgotten. I wasn't alone. With each word of support, the weight in my chest began to lift, replaced by a spark of courage. It wasn't just about rent anymore. It was about my dignity in old age. How could I let a toxic daughter-in-law dictate my fate? I left her house carrying a slice of pie wrapped in parchment paper and something even more precious, the certainty that it was time to act. As I walked back home, the autumn wind stung my face, but inside me there was a warmth I hadn't felt in years. If Carol could see the injustice so clearly, then why shouldn't I fight it too? That night, I heard hesitant footsteps in the hallway. The door to my room opened slowly, and David walked in, his shoulders slumped, his eyes distant. He carried a tray with tea and cookies, as if a small gesture could erase months of silence. Sitting on the edge of my bed, he said softly, "Mom, I'm sorry for everything that's happening." My heart ached, but anger burned hotter inside me. Could empty words heal wounds so deep? I studied him, searching for the boy who once stood tall and defended his sisters on the playground. But in front of me was only a man too afraid to confront his own wife. "David, you call me Mom, yet you stay silent while I'm humiliated. What does your apology mean if you don't have the courage to defend me?" My voice was firm, and I saw tears well in his eyes. He grasped my hand but couldn't hold my gaze. "I just want to avoid fights, Mom. It's better this way, for everyone." For everyone? Or just for his peace with Jessica? I slowly pulled my hand back, the weight of disappointment heavy on my chest. My son offered me crumbs of comfort, but not the protection I deserved, and I asked myself in silence, how can you forgive someone who chooses cowardice over justice for his own mother? The next morning, I woke up different. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, painting my forgotten room with a golden glow. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel only pain. I felt strength rising quietly inside me. I remembered Carol's words, the silent support she had given me, and I realized I wasn't a defenseless victim. I was a strong woman, a survivor of losses and battles. Why should I bow now? I stood up, straightened my bed, put on my best blue blouse, the one Robert always said made my eyes shine, and looked at myself in the mirror. The reflection staring back wasn't of a fragile old woman, but of someone whose scars had turned into armor. The smell of coffee drifted in from the kitchen, a reminder that Jessica still thought she ruled the house. But inside me, something had shifted. Maybe she didn't know it yet, but I was no longer willing to stay silent. I sat at the breakfast table, observing everything closely, the clinking of Jessica's spoon against her cup, the nervous glance David avoided meeting. Inside, I breathed deeply. I had my documents, my memories, and now my decision. I would no longer accept being treated as a burden. The question that remained was, would I have the strength to face not only my toxic daughter-in-law, but also the betrayal of my own son? 2 days later, I walked into the office of James Carter, the lawyer Carol had recommended. The heavy thud of the wooden door closing behind me filled the room with seriousness, as if I were finally taking the first step toward reclaiming my life. The scent of old books mixed with fresh coffee lingered in the air. I sat down in the leather chair and poured my heart out. Every humiliation, every silence from David, every venomous word from Jessica. James listened without interruption, jotting down notes on his pad. When I finished, he adjusted his glasses and said firmly, "Margaret, you have more strength than you realize, and something even more powerful, proof. With the deed in your name, this house is legally yours. No one can take it away from you." My heart raced. For the first time, I felt I wasn't fighting alone, yet fear crept in too. Was I ready to face a legal war against my own family? I left his office with a folder of instructions, but what weighed more heavily was the decision I had made. The cold wind outside slapped my face like a warning. The battle was only beginning. As I walked home, I thought of Robert. Would he be proud to see me standing tall, or saddened that the fight was against those we once called our own? A few days later, I sat with James and a financial expert named Sandra Rodriguez. The wooden table was covered with papers, bank statements, and document copies. Sandra carefully examined each page until she finally looked up at me. "Margaret, we found clear evidence of fraud. There are attempts to add Jessica as a co-owner of your property. The ground beneath me seemed to vanish. Fraud? Inside my own family?" I grabbed the papers with trembling hands. There were forged signatures, loan applications, even inquiries about reverse mortgages. My heart pounded, but it wasn't just fear. It was indignation. While I cooked dinners, cleaned the kitchen, and tucked in the grandchildren, Jessica had been plotting to rob me, not only of my home, but of my very identity. What kind of person plans something so cruel, so calculated, against an elderly widow? James took a deep breath. "This strengthens your case tremendously. With this evidence, the court will be on your side." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the discovery press down on me. The fight was no longer just against humiliation. It was against a carefully orchestrated crime. And I wondered, would I have the strength to expose my daughter-in-law and at the same time accept that my son had been her silent accomplice? The days in court dragged on like an endless winter. Chairs creaked, papers piled up, and each hearing seemed to drain a little more of my strength. But inside me burned a flame that would not be extinguished. I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for justice, for dignity in old age. The sharp crack of the judge's gavel echoed like a reminder that the truth was being tested. Jessica's lawyers tried to paint me as a confused old woman, incapable of handling my own decisions. They spoke of care and concern, as if sending me to a nursing home were an act of love. I stared them down and answered every question clearly, feeling Robert's presence beside me with every word. Who said a 70-year-old woman has no voice? Did they truly believe age meant weakness? Meanwhile, Jessica kept her mask of victimhood, adjusting her hair, smiling at the jury as though she were an actress on stage. But documents don't lie, and the evidence piled against her. With each passing day, I could see the scales tipping. The court was beginning to recognize what I had always known. I was not a fragile woman carried by the tide. I was the tide itself, ready to sweep away whatever tried to stand against me. Yet one question remained. What would be the final cost of this victory? The courtroom was packed on the day of the verdict. The air felt heavy, thick with expectation, as the judge adjusted his glasses and began to read. Each word felt like thunder. Guilty of fraud, elder abuse, and forgery. Sentence, 5 years in prison. The sound echoed through the walls, and I saw Jessica's face finally lose its mask of confidence. For the first time, fear and fury filled her eyes. I turned to David, sitting next to his lawyer. His sentence was lighter, 18 months, mostly on probation. Yet seeing my own child condemned cut deeper than any blade. Justice had been served, but at the price of watching my child led away in handcuffs. Was this really victory, or a punishment that left scars no court could erase? As the gavel struck the desk, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I had defeated my toxic daughter-in-law, but the trust I lost in David was irreparable. Murmurs rippled through the room as people digested the verdict. I took a deep breath, trying to anchor myself in reality. Justice had been done, but could my heart ever truly heal from such betrayal? Weeks after the sentencing, the phone rang. Catherine's trembling voice came through the line. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you." Her words pierced my heart like both balm and wound. It was comforting to hear her apology, but impossible to forget the time she dismissed my pain as exaggeration. Could a mother's love survive so many cracks? Soon after, Amanda also reached out. She came to my house with flowers, her eyes brimming with tears. "I was selfish, Mom. Caught up in my own problems, I didn't see what you were going through." I held her hands, remembering the nights I nursed her fevers, the countless times I gave without asking for anything in return. Life has a cruel way of teaching. Only when we feel pain ourselves do we learn to see the pain of others. I received my daughter's affection cautiously, like rain falling after a long drought, but onto still cracked soil. I embraced them, yes, but inside me a quiet voice whispered, "Trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild overnight." I loved them. I always would. But could I truly open my heart again without fearing another disappointment? After months of battles and tears, the house finally breathed in peace again. Waking up alone, brewing my own coffee, and smelling fresh bread in the kitchen no longer meant loneliness, it meant freedom. Every corner seemed to whisper, "You survived, Margaret. This is your victory." For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a burden, but like a whole woman once more. I decided to volunteer at a senior support center. There, I found stories much like mine, strong women marked by family betrayal, abandonment, and silent suffering. Sharing my experience became a form of healing. When one woman told me, "Margaret, you gave me the courage to stand up to my daughter," I realized that my pain had turned into purpose. Coming home after volunteering, I would sit on the porch watching the sunset reflected in the windows. Each golden ray seemed to ask me, is every new beginning possible? Maybe life doesn't always give us perfect endings, but it always offers us the chance to start again. And what's harder, starting fresh or carrying the weight of the past forever? The day I learned that David had been released from prison, it felt like a stone lodged in my stomach. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part, the mother in me, couldn't stay silent. We arranged to meet at a small cafe, far from the eyes of the neighborhood. When he walked in, I saw it immediately. His shoulders hunched, his face aged, as though he had carried years of regret in just a few months. He sat across from me, nervously stirring his cup. "Mom, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want to try to rebuild what I destroyed." His words sounded sincere, but could regret erase the silence of his complicity? I remembered every dinner where he avoided my gaze, every moment he allowed Jessica to treat me like a burden. He bowed his head, like a boy confessing his mischief. But I was no longer the mother who would sweep everything under the rug. I took a deep breath and said, "David, I can be cordial. I can allow you space in my life, but trust is earned, and you lost it." Tears streamed down his face, and though I felt pain, it was no longer weakness, it was strength. Because even if my heart still loved him as my son, I had to love myself first. Could he ever regain the place he abandoned through cowardice? That was a question only time could answer. Over time, my story began to spread. First, it was neighbors whispering at the market, then reporters knocking on my door. The widow who stood up to her family and won in court. That's what they called me. I never imagined my silent suffering would turn into inspiration. Yet suddenly, women I had never met came to me and said, "Margaret, you gave me courage." Could it be that at 71 I had become a symbol of resiliency? At the senior center, they began calling me a warrior. Each improvised speech, each piece of advice I gave was like returning strength to women who thought they had none left. I told them, document everything. Don't let anyone erase your voice. Dignity has no age. And I saw in their eyes the same spark that had been reignited in mine. What had once been wounds were now scars.
not marks of weakness, but of survival. But there was also a weight to the exposure. Reliving my pain in front of strangers reopened memories I wished I could bury. At times I wondered, how much of my story should I share? Enough to help others heal, or until it began to hurt me again? It was a thin line, but maybe that was the price of turning pain into legacy. As months passed, I realized life owed me no explanations. The house, once a stage for humiliation, had become my sanctuary again. Walking through the hallway without the weight of hostile eyes felt like breathing fresh air after years of suffocation. Every corner whispered, "You endured, Margaret." And deep down, I knew it wasn't just endurance, it was rebirth. I began tending to the garden with renewed care. The roses, once neglected, bloomed in vibrant colors as if mirroring my own recovery. In the evenings, I would sit by the pool, ironically built with money Jessica had stolen from me, and watch the sunset's reflection shimmer on the water. What had once been a bitter reminder was now a symbol of triumph. Isn't it true that even scars can bloom into beauty? I no longer had all the answers, but I had learned this. Strength doesn't come from never falling, but from rising each time we're pushed down. Would the future bring more challenges? Probably, but I felt ready. I wasn't just an elderly woman surviving. I was a whole woman, fully aware of my worth and prepared to live whatever life still had in store for me. Months later, I was invited to speak at a community center. The room was full, gray-haired women and men, but also young people listening intently. I held the microphone firmly, and as I looked at those faces, I felt my voice was no longer mine alone. It was the echo of countless stories of elder abandonment, silent suffering, and also of triumph. No one has the right to take away your dignity, no one. I shared every detail, the family betrayal, the toxic daughter-in-law, my son's silence, but also the resilience I found in the ashes. I told them, justice exists, but it needs us to fight for it. Don't stay silent. Keep records. Speak up. Demand respect. I saw tears glisten, heard sighs of relief. Those people weren't just seeing Margaret Thompson, they were seeing a strong woman who refused to be erased. When I finished, they gave me a standing ovation. I smiled, but the true emotion was inside. I had turned pain into legacy. Maybe this was the mission Robert always believed I would have, not just to survive, but to teach. That night back home, I sat on the porch and wondered, will society ever learn to treat its elders with the respect they deserve, or will it take many more voices to echo mine before that change comes?